And shalom. Yahweh Shem Yahushai, Brakatah to the apostles and the elders and all the brothers uh, throughout the different camps and GMS throughout the world. And I wanted to talk today a little about, or basically like a brief history on a very significant man in history, Marcus Aurelius. Um, Marcus Aurelius was a Jake, but if you look on Google Images, you do research on Marcus Aurelius, a lot of the images that you're going to see is going to portray him being, a white man. Um, like in the movie Gladiator, you had a veteran actor named Richard Harris who played him. Now, Richard Harris, when you look at him, he looks like a so-called white man. Now, this guy Richard Harris, he was actually born in Limerick, Republic of Ireland. He might be a Jake. He might be an Irish nigga himself, but he looks like an Edomite. The movie Gladiator, and was done in 2000, directed by Ridley Scott, who is, I believe, of Irish descent also. And but the image and the way Marcus Aurelius was portrayed, basically, he's portrayed to be a so-called white man, and that's totally false. Marcus Aurelius was also known for a lot of famous quotes. One of them is, "What we do echoes in eternity." Another famous quote of his is, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Another quote of his is, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." Another famous quote of Marcus Aurelius is, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." And those were maybe four of some of the famous quotes of Marcus Aurelius. And like I said, he's portrayed in as being a white man, referring back to the movie Gladiator, when in fact he's actually a black man. Now, if you look at this icon that's up on the screen here, it clearly shows Marcus Aurelius, and it actually says here, I got this out of a book that I was reading, reading through some history, and it says Marcus Aurelius in his triumphal car, Conservatory Museum in Rome, a panel from an ark erected by the emperor, who is represented entering Rome in triumph and attended by a victory. Now, when you clearly look at this picture, or this is actually from the Conservatory Museum in Rome, what do you see? You see a Negro with a nappy ass beard. You see a look like a well cut, roundedly cut afro hair. By looking at this picture, you can't get a white man out of this. This clearly shows Marcus Aurelius definitely was a black man. He was a Jake. And the history concerning him, he ruled basically from 160 AD to 180 AD. At his death, he died in Vindobona of the plague that was running throughout Rome. Some type of sickness. He pretty much died in his sleep. He wasn't suffocated with a pillow like what was portrayed in the movie Gladiator. Commodus didn't kill his father. That's bullshit that they put in the movie, to spice up the story. But nonetheless, Marcus Aurelius, he was a disciplinarian. He was a stoic, and he was born in 121 AD. And Marcus was given the name. He was born actually Marcus Annius Verus. His paternal great grandfather, Annius Verus from Ukubi and Baetica, if I'm pronouncing it right, had established the family fortunes by gaining the rank of senator and praetor. The emperor's grandfather was 3 times consul, and his father Annus Verus married Domitia Lucilla, whose wealthy family owned a tile factory inherited by Marcus. So he came from a well-to-do family in Rome. And in the Roman Empire, Jakes were making money and had risen to top positions in the Senate, or whether they held some type of a public office. So they rose to top positions and they had money. But because they got a Roman sounding name or a Greek sounding name or whatever, you thinking that it's a so-called white man. Because a lot of you stupid ass niggas out there, you go back and you read things throughout history and you just assume that, okay, oh, this is talking about a white man. Just like when you read in Acts the 10th chapter about the conversion of Cornelius, and you automatically assume, because it said he was of the Italian band, that he's a so-called white man, which shows the lack of understanding that a lot of you stupid ass niggas out there that call yourself Israelites have. Because the scriptures say wisdom is the principal thing, but with all thy getting, get understanding. That's what it says in Proverbs. A lot of you niggas, like Apostle Tahar always says, you're not qualified to be out there teaching. You know, a lot of you guys, you have the mind frame that every Israelite that comes into this thing is gonna have a 360-degree afro, basically look like Richard Roundtree. Gabar used to say that. You know, guys, you think every guy is gonna be like a Shalom baby, I'm Gad, or Shalom baby, I'm Asher, or Shalom baby, I'm Issachar. It ain't gonna work like that, man. You know, and a lot of you close-minded niggas, you've never traveled, you never been out of the country. Hell, you haven't been off the block that you were born on, but yet you got something to say about an Israelite that lives abroad or is born afar off. Remember in the book James 1:1, it says, James, a servant of the Most High, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. The 12 tribes of Israel wasn't all sitting in Jerusalem. They weren't all sitting up in there. They were scattered all throughout the known world at that time, and the unknown world, which was over on this side in the Americas. But to get back to Marcus Aurelius and his rise and basically the events that led to his son Commodus becoming Caesar. Marcus, as a boy, he attracted the favorable attention of the Emperor Hadrian, who nicknamed him Verissimus, made him a priest of the Saline Order when he was only 8 years old, and entrusted his education to the best teachers of the day, including the famous Fronto, who taught him Latin literature. When Hadrian adopted Lucius Aelius Caesar in 136, Marcus was allocated Aelius's daughter as his future bride. But after Aelius had died, Antoninus, whom Hadrian adopted in his space in 138, because Antoninus Pius, when he became Caesar, what Antoninus did was he immediately adopted Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus as his successors. He named them Caesar, and he adopted those two as his successors. So in the untimely event of his death, or he died of natural causes or the plague or whatever, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus would take the throne. And that was a tradition in Rome where when you became emperor, you would immediately name a successor. You would adopt a son. You would adopt someone else's son, or there's two sons or whatever, and you would name them as your successor. And it was always from a well-to-do family that this was done, because they didn't just take a boy who was a peasant and then say, look, I'm going to adopt you, have you as my adopted son, I'm going to groom you, and you're going to be Caesar when my time is up, you're going to come in and step in and be Caesar. You're going to be my successor. That's not how it worked. They were from well-to-do families. They were all connected with each other in some way or another. So when Antoninus Pius took the throne, he immediately named Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, who was the father of the little boy that was portrayed in the movie Gladiator, who was the Lucius Verus, who in the movie Gladiator was portrayed as his sister's son, which is true. She did marry Lucius Verus because when Antoninus Pius had died and Marcus Aurelius took the throne, at first Marcus Aurelius, he didn't want to take the throne as sole emperor, and he requested that his adopted brother Lucius Verus rule jointly with him. So, but Marcus Aurelius was the alpha dog of the situation. Even though they were both joint or co-emperors, Lucius Verus pretty much danced to the tune of Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus was the alpha dog of that situation. But nevertheless, they ruled jointly together, and he set up a marriage with Lucius Verus and with his daughter. I believe her name was Annia Lucilla, who was Commodus's sister, and she was his oldest sister, by the way. And at the time when he set his daughter up to marry Lucius Verus, she was, I believe, somewhere between 11 and 13 years old, and Lucius Verus was about 18 years her senior. So at the time when Lucius hooked up with Marcus's daughter, Marcus is the one who set up the marriage. His daughter Lucilla was roughly anywhere from 11 to 13 years old. For you faggot niggas out there that talk shit about us, telling you that, you know, when a woman's at that age, that young age, 11, 12 years old, she's supposed to be dealt with. She's supposed to be married off. And Marcus Aurelius married her to Lucius Verus, who was co-emperor with him. And Lucius was co-emperor with Marcus Aurelius from 160 to 169 AD. And they were on the frontier dealing with problems that they were having in Germania. So Lucius Verus, he dies of something known as an apoplectic fit, and this happened pretty much while he was on his way back to the city of Rome, and there was an outbreak of the plague, and the plague that was plaguing Rome at the time was pretty much considered. I'm gonna read a quote here from Imperial, no, not Imperial, but the Roman emperors on page 94. But Verus and his troops had brought back with them from the east a serious epidemic or plague, which was said to have first infected them at Seleucia. Its character is uncertain. It may have been smallpox, or exanthematous typhus, or bubonic plague. It was one of the three, or maybe all three. At any rate, the scourge spread with devastating results into Asia Minor, Greece. Next, it penetrated into the Italian peninsula. Already suffering from several years of bad harvests, and struck Rome even before Verus himself got back to the city. Very soon, the epidemic was carrying desolation as far as the Rhine. It left many districts almost totally depopulated and contributed substantially to the future weakening of the empire. When the plague broke out among the soldiers, however, they set out for Rome in the spring of 169 AD. This is Lucius Verus. But at an early stage in their journey, at Altinum, and Altinum was a city. It was an ancient. It was the name of an ancient coastal town of the Veneti of the modern-day Treviso in northern Italy, on the edge of the lagoons. So when Lucius was at this particular area, he was basically heading back to Rome. Verus was stricken by an apoplectic fit and died. Now that particular apoplectic fit is not epileptic; it's apoplectic, and basically it breaks down. Apoplectic comes from a Greek word that means to disable by a stroke. What is a stroke? The sudden loss of consciousness or control caused when a blood vessel in the brain ruptures, which that would be a brain aneurysm, or becomes blocked. Stroke. When this happens, a person becomes apoplectic. This word also applies to someone who acts so upset it is like he or she is having a stroke. So basically, it was either a brain aneurysm or a stroke he had, and then Lucius Verus died. So pretty much after the death of, after he died in Altinum, if I'm pronouncing it right, he was buried, so on and so forth, and him and Lucilla, just to go back to Marcus's daughter, Lucilla. Basically, in 161 AD, Marcus Aurelius had set up a marriage between her and Lucius Verus, his co-ruler. She was between 11 and 13 years old, and basically 3 years later, they actually came together. So when they actually came together, she was probably 14 or 17. But initially, when the marriage was arranged, she was between 11 and 13, and he had 3 children with Marcus Aurelius's daughter: an older daughter named Aurelia Lucilla, another daughter named Lucilla Plautia, and a young boy named Lucius Verus, which that's the little boy you see in the movie. Supposed to be the little boy you see in the movie Gladiator. Um, the eldest daughter and the youngest boy, Lucius Verus, had died. They died young, and so what her father Marcus Aurelius had done, after Lucius Verus had passed, he basically set up another marriage with her, and with another man, and the man's name was some months later or whatever. Her father arranged a second marriage for her with a man named Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus Quintianus from Antioch. He was a Syrian Roman who was twice consul and a political ally to her father. But Lucilla and her mother were against the marriage as less than an ideal match, partly because Quintianus was at least twice Lucilla's age. He was about twice her age, but Lucius Verus wasn't far from being twice her age when they hooked up, so I don't know what the problem was. But also because he was not of her own Roman nobilis, social rank. Though he was descended from rulers in the East, they married nonetheless, because she had to do what the hell her father told her to do. And that's another thing. Women, you gonna go back into your goddamn place where you just gonna take orders and do what the hell you told to do. And like her father set her up to marry Lucius Verus, and then he died. Her father set her up to marry this man, and she had to do it. So nonetheless, she married this man, and about a year later, in 170 AD, she bore him a son named Pompeianus. So now, getting back to Marcus Aurelius, because the campaigns that he was still waging campaigns in Germania and other places nonetheless. So roughly say 7 years later at this point, in 177 AD, he appointed 16-year-old Commodus, because Commodus was 16 years old at this point, and he appointed Commodus to be joint ruler with him as Caesar. So Commodus was joint ruler with his father for 3 years before his father passed. I'm going to read a quote from the Roman Emperors, page 91. During the later years of his life, Marcus Aurelius gradually brought forward his son Commodus, who was appointed Caesar in 166. So Commodus was roughly about, I believe, 5 years old at this point. Meaning his father appointed him Caesar, meaning you're going to be my successor. And joined Augustus in 177. When he became Augustus in 177, the title Augustus means emperor. So he was given the title Augustus, which was an honorary title to be given, and it also meant you were emperor. So he became joint Augustus or emperor in 177 at the age of 16 with his father Marcus Aurelius, and became sole emperor 3 years later because in 180 AD Marcus Aurelius had succumbed and died of the plague. Owing to his defects, Aurelius in retrospect was greatly blamed for this revision to the hereditary doctrine, bringing 82 years of adoptive succession to an end, because all the previous Caesars before that would always adopt someone else's son or sons, or one person's son and then another person's son, and set them up and say, "I'm gonna proclaim you Caesar." And they were little boys at the time, and then when that particular Caesar either died of old age, the plague, or was killed, they would step in and become Caesar. So they would adopt someone else's son. That son would take on the name of that particular Caesar that was in office, and then they would become Caesar. But what Marcus Aurelius did was he had his own sibling. He had his son of his own loins come in and be Caesar, and that was unheard of there in Rome up until that time. So Commodus comes in 177 at 16. 3 years later, when he's 19, he becomes sole emperor of Rome. And Commodus was a wild boy because after his father died of the plague in Vindobona, they actually show you that in the movie Gladiator. His sister and him, they were in Vindobona, and his father had died of the plague in his sleep, basically. Commodus didn't suffocate his father with a pillow and kill him. That didn't happen. He pretty much died of the plague. And then Commodus comes in and he reigns. So, again, like I said, Commodus was a wild boy. And I'm going to read a quote about Commodus from the book called Imperial Rome, page 141. It says, when Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD, probably of the plague that was ravaging the empire, he was succeeded by the first of many tyrants, his own son Commodus. According to one contemporary, the historian Cassius Dio, Commodus was a greater curse to the Romans than any pestilence or crime, vain and frivolous. He ordained that Rome be called Commodiana after him, much like what Antiochus Epiphanes did when you read in the Maccabees about everybody had to call themselves Antiochians. He told Israel, look, you got to call yourselves Antiochians. He ordained that Rome be called Commodiana, and gave himself up to the pleasures of executions, chariot races, and lion baiting. His despotism so damaged and discredited the office of princeps that his prestige was all but destroyed. Finally, after 12 years of misrule, Commodus was assassinated. And that's what was, said about Commodus. So he was a wild boy. Commodus, he liked, you read up about him and get a little deep into him. He reigned for 12 years. He wasn't just in there for a couple months and then he was out of there. That didn't happen. So, again, the movie Gladiator took the truth and they mixed in fiction and fantasy with it. And, changed up a whole lot of stuff. Because he didn't die fighting Maximus Decimus Meridius in the arena. That didn't happen. And Maximus didn't exist. That's a fictitious character. But nonetheless, Commodus basically was saying, look, he's the son of Hercules, and he used to adorn himself with wearing a lion's skin, or basically a lion's actual skull, gutted out, and wear it over his head like Hercules, and don the club of Hercules. And he's saying that he was the son of Hercules. And Commodus, he was a wild boy. But 2 years into his reign, 2 years into his reign, in 182 AD, his sister, getting back to his sister, his older sister, Aeneas Lucilla. Aeneas Lucilla, she was typical black bitch, just like the modern day black bitch of today. You know, scandalous. You know, wanna be over the man and all this other shit that these hoes strive to be in the society, and they actually have achieved it because of the homosexualized white man. But his sister in 182, basically in light of her brother's unstable rule in 182, this is 2 years into his reign, Lucilla became involved in the plot to assassinate her own brother Commodus and replace him with Imperial Guard. Her daughter Plautia, from her first marriage, that's the only child that survived from the marriage that she had to Lucius Verus prior, because she had 3 children. The middle child, which was Plautia, is the one who survived. A nephew of Quintianus, which is her new husband, Quintianus, his nephew was also recruited in the plot to kill Commodus, and his name was also called Quintianus, after his famous uncle that was married to Aeneas Lucilla, and her paternal cousins, a couple of her cousins, the former consul Marcus Aurelius Quadratus Ananianus, and his sister Umidia Cornificia Faustina. Now, her husband's nephew, Quintianus, brandishing a dagger, you know, he had a dagger or a sword on him. He was basically either in Commodus's room or area hiding. So this dumbass, he messed up, he bungled the assassination attempt, you know, trying to kill Commodus. As he burst out from his hiding place to commit, you know, the deed, this dumbass starts boasting to Commodus. Instead of going up to him and just jig the shit out of him and kill him, he starts boasting to Commodus, here is what the Senate sends to you. And he gave away his intentions, and before he had a chance to act, Commodus's guards jumped on his ass like lightning, like greased lightning, knocked the knife or the dagger out of his hand. They overpowered him, they disarmed him. Commodus wasn't injured, and then Commodus ordered this guy Quintianus to be killed. And this other guy, Marcus Aurelius Quadratus Ananianus, and his sister Lucilla, her daughter Plautia, and Umidia Cornificia Faustina, he banished them to the Italian island of Capri. And then what he did was he sent a centurion there to execute them later that year. And the son that she had, his name was Pompeianus, the son that she had by this guy Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus Quintianus, the son she had with that man in 170 AD, later on he was murdered by Caracalla. Caracalla is Septimius Severus' son. So some years later, this guy Pompeianus was murdered by Septimius Severus', I believe Caracalla was the elder son. You had Caracalla, and then you had Gator Severus. Caracalla Severus and Gator Severus. Years later, you know, he got whacked by Septimius' son. You know, but nonetheless, so after the plot, you know, Commodus was up in there for the next 10 years doing his thing. And then pretty much they had enough of Commodus's shit, and then Commodus was taken out of there. And it was the Praetorian that set up the execution of him. And I believe also another character who was really a part of the scene back then was Quintus. You see Quintus in the movie Gladiator, they portray him as being a white man. Quintus was a nigger. And Quintus was the one who had set up Commodus to be killed. And just to back that statement up that I made about Quintus being involved and being the one who set Commodus up to be killed. I'm gonna read a quote from the book The Roman Emperors once more, and this is on page 97. And it says, finally, a new Praetorian prefect. Prefect means, like, a ruler, or somebody that's in a position of authority, basically, when you look it up. Finally, a new Praetorian prefect, Quintus Aemilius Laetus. This is the Quintus, the figure that you see in the movie Gladiator. But he was a Jake. Quintus Aemilius Laetus, the first North African, it seems, to hold the post. So basically, this was a Jake from North Africa, and he was the first North African to hold the post to be head of the Praetorian Guard. Decided that Commodus had become insupportable, and the emperor's mistress Marcia and the court chamberlain Eclectus agreed with him. In case the army might react unfavorably to the termination of the Antonine dynasty, because Commodus would be the last heir of the Antonine dynasty, going back to Antoninus Pius, who selected his father Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus as his successors. So that would have been the end of the Antonine dynasty if Commodus was killed. That's what that means right there. And it says, however, supporters of their proposed coup also had to be enlisted from among leading figures in the provincial administrations. Now I'm going to skip down to where it says here, now finally, on the last night of the year 192, so this is basically the last night of 192 AD, plans for the assassination of Commodus were complete, and an athlete named Narcissus, whom he employed as a wrestling partner. So this guy Narcissus was a wrestler who basically was like Commodus's personal trainer, training him in wrestling or whatever, whom he employed as a wrestling partner, succeeded in strangling him, while Senate and people condemned the late emperor's memory, pulled down his statues, and erased his name from inscriptions. Laetus, which is that's Quintus, because his name is Quintus Aemilius Laetus, although probably responsible for the murder, saved the body from a traitor's grave and gave it secret burial. So pretty much that's the information letting you know that Quintus was the one that really set up the plot to kill Commodus. And pretty much that's the information right there, letting you know that he was a Jake, because Jake was all up in North Africa, as well as other people that were major players in the Roman Empire. And I'm going to end this video with a quote that I read in the beginning from Marcus Aurelius, which is, the object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. And what that scripture, or not scripture, but this quote from Marcus Aurelius really sounds like to me, it sounds like a scripture in the book of Exodus, the 23rd chapter, in the 2nd verse, which says, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in the cause to decline after many to wrest judgment." Right? Because basically, and that applies to us as GMS as a whole, because the multitude out there of those different Israelite groups, whether it's General Gehenut's group or the GOCC, or whether it's Zabak's group or whatever, those guys are all in line with that bullshit out there. One guy teaches that the chip is an embargo, which is General Gehenna. Then the GOCC, they teach that the chip is actually the mark of the beast, right? But they teach that the white man could be saved. You understand? Then you got Zabak and his group. They teaching that Cornelius is an Edomite and not an Israelite. Scripture never said he was an Edomite. It just said he was of the Italian band. And as you see from me reading this history on the Roman Empire, Jake was all up in the Roman Empire. Even Quintus, like I said, who was the leader of the Praetorian, he was the first North African to get that office, and he was a Jake because Jake was all up in North Africa. Okay, Jake been in there in North Africa going back to the time of the Ptolemaic dynasty, because the Ptolemies had took maybe 70,000 or more Israelites, and they placed them in North Africa to work for them. So Jake was back up in there going back to the Ptolemaic dynasty. And from the Ptolemy on down to the Roman Empire, Jake was still up there in North Africa. So the scripture once again said, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil." We're not following or doing the things that the multitude of you uh, Israelites out there are into. The things that you say, the things that you guys are doing, like that 501c charter bullshit. We're not a part of that. So I'm gonna read the quote from Marcus Aurelius again. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, which we ain't with the majority of you niggas, because a lot of you guys are niggas, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. We're not gonna be found in the ranks of you insane ass niggas out there that call yourselves Israelites. So this was a hell of a quote that Marcus Aurelius had laid down during his lifetime before he passed to the plague. Read it again. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane, which goes hand in hand with Exodus 23:2. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment. So then, after many, because the majority believes this one thing, so basically we're going to pervert the judgment of the Lord so that the majority of you can be happy with it. And that's not what's going to happen. And with that, I'm going to say shalom and Kwam Yasha'Allah to all the brothers, the GMS camps throughout the world, and those of you who believe in the word of the Most High, and you're not with that bullshit, but you're not a part of GMS. I'm going to say shalom.